The NFL has banned the hip drop tackle. 15-yard penalty and an automatic first down will be enforced should a player use that technique.
And, most critically, it will be enforced using fines.
Which you hate.
Yes, I do. So, you want my take on this?
Yeah.
I don't mind banning the hip drop tackle as a concept, right? I think the NFL wants to change the game. Pretty much every contact sport in the world is changing the game in a safer direction, right? They are banning things that previously used to be legal. The NFL has been doing it for decades. You go and watch a tape of Joe Montana playing the game. The dude, every play is a penalty now. Joe Montana would get a roughing the passer penalty every other drop back in today's NFL. So we're already changing the game for in a more safe direction. And actually, people were kind of railing against it at the time. But if you watch most of those late hits, you're like, yeah, fair enough. That should be a penalty now. It's okay. It's worked. We've all become conditioned to this newer, softer, quote-unquote, NFL, where it is safer and you do get less piss-taking hits, right? So we're all changing in this direction. The hip drop tackle is the latest, where they've looked at this thing and they've said, like the horse collar before it, this has a disproportionate volume of injuries for the good that it brings to the game. You can tackle without doing this. We're going to ban it. Now, people will say rugby has banned it. I think it's only rugby league has banned it. But it has been banned in other sports. Point being, it is possible to tackle without doing it hip drop wise. So I don't have a problem saying we want to take this out of the game. It injures people at a ridiculous level. It's going to be a penalty going forward. What I think is a very bad way of doing it is by enforcing it via penalty, or via fines, rather, on players. Because you're immediately taking money out of guys' pockets for something that was legal yesterday. You're trying to immediately change behavior. And that's going to take some time, and it's going to take some penalties, and that shouldn't cost people money because you're trying to change the game. It's also completely impossible to 100% eliminate these plays. They're going to show up at some point. It's a violent game happening in split seconds. There are going to be certain instinctive times where you just commit a penalty. Again, I don't think that should cost you $20,000 out of your pocket because you're trying to shift the game. I think if you want to change the game, penalties are fine, and you need to come up with some other deterrent that is not financial, because this shouldn't be costing players money because you're trying to change behavior.
So the other good stuff. The other tricky part about the ban, correct me if I'm wrong, is this not how the NFL has been trying to teach children to tackle? The kids that they've been teaching for the last 10 plus years?
No.
What's the history of, because there's like this element of like the Seattle tackling method and everything, right? Give us the quick history here.
The problem that NFL has in terms of tackling, and I do think that football has an institutional tackling problem. The NFL, because of the way, so you go back to the 1800s, the NFL and rugby were the same game, right? They eventually diverged, they go in different directions, and one of the key differences is stopping a guy dead, progress-wise, is more important in football than it is in rugby. You can absorb a tackle in rugby, give up 2 yards in the process, and you're fine, right? Now, it's still, ideally you want to stop him at the gain line, but it's not the end of the world if you give up those 2 yards. In the NFL, that can be the difference between a first down and not, right? It's a critical part of the game. You need to be able to stop a guy's momentum. So the NFL taught guys for a long, long time to get your head on the other side of the body so that more of your body is in front of the guy, the ball carrier, so that he's hitting a brick wall, right? So that you have more weight behind the tackle. Rugby, for a long time, has taught this cheek-to-cheek tackling technique where face cheek goes against ass cheek, and your head is out of the way of the tackle effectively every single time you're tackling. So you hit with the shoulder, your cheek is on the other side of the tackle, and you go down that way, and you give up a little bit in terms of the actual contact, but you keep your head out of the way so you don't get concussed as much. So the NFL, for a while, now they're like, well, okay, we've now realized that we're creating this like world of concussions that is getting us sued by people and class action, all that kind of thing. We now need to figure out how we get this head out of the tackle, but we've been institutionalizing it from such a degree. So you had teams like the Seahawks try and teach these hawk tackle things, which effectively was a rugby tackle. It's different to the hip drop, right? Their thing was you would grab hold of the guy's legs, grab him by the thighs, cheek to cheek, and then effectively they would have you roll down, right? That's not the same as essentially chasing a guy down from behind, grabbing hold of his hips, and then swinging yourself around onto his legs. Rolling with him is different to swinging yourself onto his legs from behind, which is the hip drop tackle.
And so this is almost always a tackle from behind. We no longer have the horse collar.
Or from the sort of three-quarter angle, where you're chasing a guy down, you grab hold of him, and then you swing yourself around momentum and drop down on him.
I think for something that's the tricky part here is you want to have consequences. That's why they have fines. That's why college has targeting where you're kicked out of the game and suspended another game. You want to have consequences.
And I think that, by the way, as much as people hate that, that's a much fairer way to defenders of doing it than fining them, in my opinion.
But you lose a game check, don't you? If you're suspended for a game, you lose a game check.
So I don't think you should. I think it should be a paid suspension.
Okay. Fair. I mean, either way, you need consequences, right?
Yes.
So you need consequences to get it out of it. But I think because they had such a tough time defining this and coming around to it, can't you just have light consequences while you're trying to figure this thing out for year one? The thing I don't like when I'm watching a game, right, as all of the rules, I liked the idea. You called it defense fighting back last year. I liked having lower scoring games and some more competitive games. And I think a lot of that may have been because the quarterbacks all got hurt last year or whatever.
Right.
But every last rule in the last 20 years has been to the offense's benefit.
Right.
And there's nothing, I think, as just a football fan, because I'm wearing the NFL hat right now, as a football fan watching a game and it's 3rd and 17 and there's an illegal contact, automatic first down, or there's now a hip drop, or there's a roughing the passer, automatic first down, and now there's this, 15 yards, 15% of the football field, right? You start your drive at the 25, you have one of these, you're immediately at the 40. I mean, you're 2 plays away from field goal range. This is instantly putting points back on the board for the offense. So from a football watching perspective, I just want fewer 15-yard penalties and automatic first downs at the same time while trying to, as you said, make the game safer. I also don't want our best players, our favorite players, our favorite players to watch getting hurt and rolled up on and getting injured. So I appreciate getting those plays out of the game for safety purposes.
It's a difficult balancing act because I think in order for you to create a legitimate deterrent and something that will change behavior, the consequences for doing it has to be draconian. It has to be almost more severe than the penalty itself lends itself to. So for rugby, it was basically any head contact was getting a red card where the guy is immediately ejected from the game, doesn't play for the rest of it. And so you had a lot of situations where you had what's really a marginal play. You see these in the NFL as well. The ones where they were really hot on the illegal, the roughing the defenseless receiver thing for a couple of years, right? And you had a couple of these that were really marginal, just off. And it's no, that's a ejected, or that's a flagrant hit, that kind of thing. You almost need to be erring on that side because otherwise you're not going to change the behavior because it's going to be too easy for everyone to go, it was just too close, it was a bang play. What are they supposed to do? It's borderline, and we let them get away with it, and you perpetuate that behavior. So if you genuinely want to change the way the game is played, you kind of have to go through a period where you're being too harsh on these things so that people err on the other side of the line, and now you can back off at some point and you've changed the behavior. One thing I do want to say, you will hear a lot of defensive players now that this is a thing say, how are you supposed to tackle a guy, right? You only have to watch rugby to see that you can tackle people from those angles without hip dropping, right? It's doable. Instead of swinging yourself around onto the back of his legs, just wrap his legs and drop your arms, and he'll go straight over. It's doable. It's perfectly plausible. Does it become harder because you have one way of tackling no longer available to you? Sure. But it's not like defense is now impossible. We can't play this game without being able to hip drop.
How common has the hip drop been? It seems
like it's gotten pretty prevalent, to be honest.
It's a pretty new phenomenon, though. People weren't doing this.
I think they probably
that much years ago.
No, I think this is a way that's been tackled for a while in the NFL. But I think it is becoming more common. And again, I have no problem stamping it out. I just think that the way of doing it, the NFLPA, in my opinion, got railed in the last CBA. And to an extent, it's inevitable because they're trying to represent the interests of like 5,000 people as opposed to 32 who all get to choose what their agenda is.
Right.
So they might just be on a no-win proposition every time they go into that bargaining room. But they
Well, I mean, listen, really quick. The NFLPA compared to, say, the MLBPA, the Major League Baseball's Players Association is extremely strong. And so they usually come out winners in their negotiations. I think the NFL, but the difference is the MLBPA is always fighting for something financial, essentially. That is their number one priority. They don't have to fight for safety.
Right.
The NFLPA has to fight for safety first. They're trying to take care of their people, which is why the franchise tag, which is archaic and they don't like, probably isn't going away. It just can't be one of their top priorities because they're trying to have less practice time and take care of their players first. That's why the NFLPA, I believe, loses when it comes to rule changes, loses when it comes to finances.
I don't even think that it's just it's that the interests of a veteran player are wildly different from the interests of the rookies that are coming in, and the interests of one position is different to the interests of another.
Other
position.
Sports have that though. That's not unique to football.
No, but the point is, I think the NFL is very good at saying, okay, like figuring out what to give them, and then destroying them on the other things that they need to give up in order to make that happen, right? And the NFLPA has a really tough time zeroing in on what the two things they want to get out of every negotiation are, and everything they lose in consequence, the NFL kills them on. One of the things they lost is this ability for the NFL to basically just fine players to oblivion at like arbitrarily. Now, okay, the fines go to charity, right? So it's not like the NFL is just stealing money from them, but players are getting financially, not ruined, but players are getting financially like hit hard for football plays, for things that should not be taking money out of your paycheck, right? And plenty of them are ones where they get missed. If an official didn't see it live,
and you're still getting fined,
you should not be getting fined $48,000 on a Monday for it, right? If it was that obvious, the dude should have seen it with a flag. And if it wasn't, you probably shouldn't be able to fine a guy for it.
It does feel pretty ridiculous.
But anyway, I think that fining is a bad way of doing this. I have no problem with the concept of trying to take this type of tackle out of the game. I think it can be taken out of the game. I think it probably does create a disproportionate volume of injuries. It's exactly like the horse collar to me. We got rid of that. It's not the biggest deal in the world. I just think doing it via fines is an egregious, like, unfair thing to happen to players.
As always, we're going to get in here on a Monday morning. It's going to be 7:45. We're going to be in game 3 of our 15-game review, and we're going to be talking about the egregious hip drop tackle call that an official made that put a team into field goal range for the game-winning field goal.
Yep.
Right, save that clip. We'll play it in week 7 when this happens next year, whatever it is. That just more anxiety for us having to deal with it because the officials have to implement it and enforce it.
I think you have to.
Anything there, please give us more communication in New York. The more we have to make these subjective calls that are 15% of the football field. We just need more communication and more just collaboration.
Yeah. Number one, I don't think that's ever going to happen. Number two, I think you do need to accept, though, a period where there are going to be, number one, bad calls, and number two, calls that feel disproportionately draconian relative to the infraction that was happening. I do think that's necessary to enact change, but I think you're right. One of the critical pieces that makes that easier to stomach is transparency with the process and understanding what they did, right? When you hear the conversation talked out, like, this is why we're doing this is what he did, this is how we come to this conclusion, ergo it's a 15-yard penalty, it's easier to stomach. You at least understand why they came to that conclusion. When you simply hear, what's the personal foul, 15-yard penalty, hip drop tackle, end of story. That's what annoys people. The NFL should be more transparent with their officiating decisions, and they won't be because reasons.